Welcome back to Andersen Acres. We're out here with Shadowax today. And today we are going to discuss whether or not you should blanket your mini horse. Now this causes so much debate in the horse world. All you have to do is go into a horse group and say, I always blanket my horse, or I never blanket my horse, and it will cause an argument. There are so many people who are like, you must blanket, or you should never blanket. But the truth is, the answer is more nuanced than yes or no. There are a lot of factors that go into deciding whether or not you should blanket your mini horse. I'm just kicking a string out of the way. That was that funky camera work. I was kicking a string. Anyway, there's a lot of factors. It's a very individual question, and the answers are just as individual. So the first thing you want to consider is your climate. Your climate's probably not like my climate. So if you're in a really warm area, you might only need maybe a fly sheet. Maybe your flies are really bad. Maybe you need a rain sheet because you get a lot of rain. But you might not need to worry about a winter blanket because you don't get that cold. That's fine. If you do get somewhere that's very, very cold, you might want to make sure that you have a winter blanket just in case. You also want to consider the age and condition of your pony. You want to remember that the very young and the very old might need a blanket. Even if you think they don't need one, they expend a lot of energy to keep warm. And so your very young or your very old mini horse might need a blanket just to help relieve some of that stress, just so they don't have to use quite so much energy to stay warm in the winter. All right, sorry about that. Had a little bit of I dropped my phone. It wasn't anybody's fault. It wasn't the horse or anything. It was just me losing my grip. So, where were we? Yeah, you might want to make sure that your hard keepers, so the horses that have a hard time keeping weight on, or anyone who is ill or currently recovering from being ill or injured, is blanketed because they need all their energy to go into keeping warm or getting healthy. So making them cold in the wintertime is not fair. Okay, so blanket those horses if you need to. Also, if you've clipped your horse. So remember that a clipped horse can experience cold in the winter because they don't have the fuzzy woolies that mini horses get in the wintertime. So if you have clipped your horse, remember that it's your job to keep him warm. If he's cold, you might need to blanket him. In cold weather, unclipped ponies probably are okay, but clipped ponies may need to be blanketed because they'll get cold. It's cold out there. If your pony is unclipped and he's healthy and he's got shelter, he probably doesn't need to be clipped to be blanketed, to be honest, because a mini horse does develop that really great winter coat, and as long as they can stay dry and they can get out of the wind, get into their shelter out of the wind, they're probably okay. In fact, blanketing a perfectly healthy, robust miniature horse can actually be detrimental. What do I mean by that? I mean that when they get their winter woolies, which Shadowax doesn't have right now because it's August, but if you have the winter woolies, if your pony has the winter woolies and you put a blanket on them, you essentially squash the winter woolies. Okay, the winter woolies are fluffy for a reason. So if you squash that fluffy coat, you actually reduce its effectiveness. It no longer functions as proper insulation. So blanketing a robust, healthy mini horse that has access to shelter and is typically unbothered by the weather, you probably don't need to do that. Now, if your horse is shivering, if your horse is thin, then certainly blanket them anyway. Monitor your mini, especially in adverse weather conditions, whether it's really, really cold out or whether it's pouring rain. Monitor your mini's condition. Make sure you know how he's doing, and if you need to, blanket him. It doesn't hurt to have a blanket or two in your tack room where you're just making sure he's okay. All right, you might never need those particular items. You might not need your blanket. You might buy it and never use it, and that's okay too. That is completely okay. It's better to have it and never need it then need it and not have access to one, because miniature horses take a miniature-sized blanket. And so that miniature-sized blanket might be hard to come by in your area. I know our tack stores do not stock miniature horse-sized stuff. I have to order it all in. I can order it through the tack store, but I have to order it, and it takes a couple weeks. You may not have a couple weeks. So my recommendation is to have those blankets on hand. You might never need them. So I've got a rain sheet for Shadowax. We don't use it, but I could. If I needed it, I could use it. So that is absolutely my recommendation there. Make absolutely sure you have those items, but monitor your miniature horse and decide if blanketing is right for you and your horse, because you might not need to do it. Just remember, the answer to should you blanket your mini is entirely individual. It depends on your climate, on your horse, and on his current condition. So Shadowax doesn't need to be blanketed. He's rarely blanketed. I think we've used the rain sheet once. Maybe. I'm not even sure we actually used it. I think we just tried it on just to make sure it fit. It did. But you don't necessarily have to use those blankets. Just make sure you have them. You should have whatever you need for your climate, just in case. But don't use them if you don't need them. Especially in the winter, you don't want to squash those winter woolies. That's about it for us here today at Andersen Acres. Blanket or not blanket, that's up to you. We'll see you tomorrow.